listening to the Lamptey Show. My name is Joey, and this week I am joined by Neil
Hello.
and by Dom.
Hello.
Back home.
Yes. About time.
And it's really nice because the sense that I get from everybody that I've spoken to, and I wasn't fortunate enough to be there, is that it really, really lived up to expectations. Is that fair to say, Neil?
Yeah, totally. Because although it was one of those weekends where everybody was going on about being back home because obviously the pandemic meant people couldn't go for a long time, we were properly back home. This was, there's a real feeling of kind of unity and remembering what it used to be like there. And there's always been this idea that the Rico, the CBS, has been kind of a soulless place. And, when we're shit and rubbish, it can feel like that because nobody's turning up. But when you get 20,000 people in there, mostly hyped up, ready to go, and you get quite an excitable game ahead of you, and then it finishes like that, then it all builds up to, you just remember why you like it and why you like going to football matches. And yesterday was very much one of those.
The other thing is that we have been unilaterally rubbish every time we've been in that stadium, haven't we? And there's, I guess now that we've experienced what it's like to be quite good, you kind of go, oh, maybe the atmosphere would have been better if we'd have been like this in there.
Well, that's kind of it. I mean, because I still pick back at times when we have been good or we've done good things. And, it's quite nice being at a football match when you do good things. So I don't have terrible memories when we're beating Preston in the last minute. And I know it's kind of isolated incidents, but it just goes to show where if it's all right on the pitch, we're not too bad either ourselves. But, let's face it, we've had some absolute nonsense happening in front of us. And you can't help but be a little bit annoyed by it. So it was just, like you say, with this new kind of trajectory that we're on as a club, in the sense where we feel like there's an element of stability around the manager, and there's a club that we actually quite enjoy watching, and we're used to winning games of football. Maybe the CBS can be somewhere where we can all go and enjoy watching matches of football together. Who knows, eh?
How are you dealing with the name of the stadium, Dom?
To be honest, I've just been calling it the Rico. It just just sounds better, unfortunately.
I'm trying my hardest here, Don. Come on.
I wonder whether
Yeah.
part of the reason of them taking a 10-year contract for the ownership is they're hoping that by the end of that 10 years, somebody might have described it as the CBS. Although, Neil, I noticed that you just did, so I guess...
This is effort. This is real effort, yeah.
Yeah, fair play. Right, should we do moments of the week? I mean, our cup runneth over this week compared to some of... even last week when we'd had the entire summer, it felt a bit like we were like, when we signed the... I think we're pretty good this one, aren't we? Neil, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, there's loads that's gone on this week, and even if the football hadn't have happened, I'd be talking about the fact that we got a really nice pink kit. Now, I saw the kit immediately, and I was like, I quite like it. I really like pink and blue as a combo. It worked well in the football kit, and that one specifically, the color combo worked well. And then I looked at the comments, and everybody was saying, it's just using the template from last year. I was like, oh, that's a shame, because I kind of want to like it. And am I still allowed to like it? Because the template thing, while on the face of it, people say is lazy, it still looks good. So, I like the new kit. I think it's it's a nice addition. It's something that we haven't really done for over 100 years. So, bring it back. I'm fine with that. But that wasn't actually, go on. Talk about
just
kit.
very quickly. I've got something of an aversion towards the color red. So I don't know why, but that I just don't get on with the color. So I liked last season's shirt, but I couldn't wear it because it's red. I know that sounds terribly childish and whatever. It's just so happens.
Is it just not you? Does it not?
I don't know. It's just what's it. It's just it doesn't vibe with me.
It's a bit much. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, it was two things. One, I like that kit design, whether it's a template or not. I think it looks quite old-fashioned and good. And as well, it looks old-fashioned in a way that doesn't look like the 90s, which I think a lot of stuff does, which isn't terrible, but that seems to be the standard at the moment, is to sort of aim for the 90s. It looks much older than that. And also, I think the pink and the blue is probably outside of green and black, which I think I'd probably take every single year. I think the pink and blue is about a good colour combination as possible. So I'm terribly excited about the away shirt. I think it looks fantastic.
I'm glad you think that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but actually, I think last season being red and black, if anything, it's heightened my enjoyment of this one because I was like, oh, I get the version of this that I actually wanted. Sorry, but Neil, you were going to go on to say something else.
Yeah, so that was. I mean, that's probably a more relevant moment of the week. The only other moment of the week was just getting back into the Rico. I'm going to call it the Rico because I tried and it just didn't work. So, getting back into Rico, and it all felt really familiar and normal. And I sat down in my seat, which is vaguely where I used to be about 5 years ago. And somebody has obviously paid for a padded version, so I was very lucky in that sense. And it was all very familiar, but there's nobody I recognised around me. And then suddenly I started hearing somebody behind me asking everyone around them whether they enjoyed their packet of crisps and whether it tasted well. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I need. Lunatics around me, talking nonsense, being inane. I'm back. This is now the Rico. And I'm looking forward very much to observing and listening to a range of new and weird and wonderful around people. That, for me, is what the football's all about.
I mean, that's a beautiful start. Dom, moment of the week?
I am going to go for the 15-minute period in the second half where the fans sang nothing but twist and shout. And it was right after Nottingham Forest were just like, your support is effing S, and like giving it the big one. And to be fair, sort of as great as it was being back, there were periods during that game, I think up until that sort of twist and shout, where it was kind of that familiar Rico feeling of just the ground. Maybe it's a bit too big for us, and maybe the atmosphere isn't so great here, and the team on the pitch isn't doing that well either. You're just hoping for something to lift it, and no one's in the mood for it, and the game's sort of dragging on, and it's going to be another famous away victory for someone else, and we're going to have to walk past on the East Stand as you're leaving. You can hear the away fans singing. That's always the worst part for me. But then just have that reversal, and I don't know how much that actually like affects the player's performance, but it was just sort of a show of defiance, really, sort of returning to an old, normal, and we were rewarded in quite a fantastic way.
I really liked it. What I liked most about it, like you say, it's a show of defiance. But in the past, the show of defiance has always been calling ourselves shit and just saying, yeah, we don't care about being shit. We are. And this year, that was more of a, yeah, we're going to start singing. We're going to make some noise, and we're really going to get behind the team, and we're going to show that we're back kind of approach to things. And it's never that concerted, but it really worked, didn't it? I mean, there was a big shift in mindset around the stadium, and it just seemed to transfer onto the pitch somehow, and we just really gained some energy from it.
I don't remember ever having heard twist and shout so audibly at a home game that was on Sky. And as well, is that what was noticeable about it is that in the second half, my oldest was a little bit poorly, and so I was watching it on a tablet in the living room where the dominant audio was coming from Superhero Squad on the main telly. So I'd got the sound right down, and I turned it up after a little bit because I was like, "Is that twist and shout coming out that loudly that he's able to beat a cartoon Iron Man?" And yeah, it was really, really class, wasn't it?
Oldness. Yeah, good.
For me, it's Jody Jones coming on, which I think was the one is just a lovely moment. And it's a number of things, which I guess we'll go on to talk about in a bit more detail. It's a number of things. One, the moment itself is lovely because of his narrative arc. And I saw James Madison tweeting again today to say, you can only begin to imagine how hard this lad has worked. And I also think that it was pivotal moment in the second half where the atmosphere changed and it really, really, really kicked off then. And also, I thought he was good. I thought he was, especially playing left wing back, which you'd have to think isn't what he wants to do. I know it was only a tiny snippet of him in a game where we were on the ascendancy, and I don't think they were looking to test his defensive merits terribly. But he just looked championship all right to me. Like I know that you could say Da Costa looked championship all right against Forest last season, then palpably isn't. But I was quite impressed that you were like, well, you look all right.
Maturity. So that out of nowhere, like him coming back with everything that must be going through his mind, to then have the entire left wing to yourself, and to show some real intent moving forward, some smart passes forward, but then also positionally seeming to want to do everything he can for the team, whilst also recognizing that, he hasn't played a proper match in a very long time, and this must have been very nervy for him. I think it was a really, really promising return from him, and like you say, I'm just so pleased that he was able to get back on the pitch, and we're actually seeing him again. And and I just want that from him for the moment. Just want to see him coming off the pitch, gaining that confidence, getting those minutes, and getting the fans behind him, and really sort of pushing him on now in his career.
I thought he looked really fearless.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the fact,
you must have been, if you're coming on, you must be literally thinking, I've done this before, and the last times that it happened have been like the worst things that have ever happened to me. And if it happens again now, it's the end of my career. And yet he just got on the ball and drove forward and got tackled and stuff. You just think, you don't even look like I wanted to shake him and be like, this is much, you should be much more scared. I was delighted. Right, okay, so the game itself. Neil, you're going to pick up from the beginning, aren't you?
Yeah. So obviously, new season. We've had the pre-season. It's not necessarily been that exciting or that successful in the sense where we've not really scored much or won many games. But you always have an idea of kind of what you're going to do and how we're going to play and all that sort of stuff. What I didn't have an idea of was that we'd be putting Dabo in our back three and putting Da Costa on the right side of the thing. That was a bit of a curveball from the team, and it really, to me, smacked of Da Costa's done well in training this week, and we did try and find a way to get him in the team.
I hate to cut in so early, but Dom, was it you that said either on WhatsApp or on Twitter, tremendous vote of confidence for both Declan Drysdale and Josh?
It was a strange one, wasn't it? It's just nobody could really call it. Just not so much for Da Costa getting in the team because there have been moments at the back end of last year where he played. He showed at points that he had something about him. More so that you wouldn't play Dabo.
That's the thing.
Clearly, your most effective right wing back and one of our best players. You wouldn't put him in his optimum position. I mean, you would essentially, and it was just a bit of a punt. It seemed like to me, and I think we can all agree without getting to the end of the Da Costa story so quickly. I don't think it worked out for the lad. He gave the performance that he tends to give, and I always talk about kind of capability and what somebody is when they're playing at that optimum, what they can produce. And we've seen him at points play in a way where you can say, I can get on with you on the right hand side of our defence or midfield because you do have something. Unfortunately, that only tends to be about 5% of the time. The rest of the time, it's him threatening to cross way too early and not doing that very well. And it's just a bit infuriating, really, that I'm sure they see something in him. And like I say, I think a lot of that must come in training. And I'm sure he had something in training. But when it comes to the big back pitch, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to. Yesterday didn't seem to work for him either. It was a bit of a punt, and that didn't seem to work out. On the left hand side, obviously we had the new lad Mattson, who epitomised in my mind. I gave a description at half time of us being excitable and rusty. And he was very much that. I mean, how old is he? Is he 18 himself? He's only 19. Young, isn't he? 19, 18. Obviously did well last season, coming from a club with a lot of pedigree and people getting behind him. But he looked 19. He looked like he was very, very keen to impress. But the touch wasn't quite there. And ultimately, I don't think necessarily he gave it a performance that he would have been necessarily pleased with. I'm sure he can do much more. And I don't think today is anything about, or this, the match is about judging people fundamentally about who they are and what they did on that day and how that might mean for the rest of the season. But I think we can all be fair that probably wasn't the best left wing back debut. While he gave it, he got a lot of the ball and he tried his best. There was a lot of iffy touches, a lot of excitable ball rebounding off his knee, that sort of thing, and some off decisions. So it's one of those where you look at him and you think, well, we'll continue to give him a go, I'm sure, simply because I don't think Jody Jones at left wing back is a particularly sustainable option. So, we don't really have much of an option other than to play this kid and let him find his feet. And I think from where he's come from and what he did last season, I think we've got a chance that he will find his feet, but it didn't necessarily work out for him yesterday.
Can we just, before we leave,
yeah.
Maatson, two things. One, I think I mean, can you remember how off the pace Dujon Sterling looked when he first came? I wouldn't be
For
at
a
all
long time as
surprised.
well, yeah.
And I wouldn't be at all surprised. He was at Charlton last season, I think, wasn't he?
Mm.
If you think about even away from Sterling, if you think about the time it took for some of the players to step up from League One to the Championship, which is now exactly what he's doing, I think he either may never do it or it might take him some time or whatever. What I would say is, one, I hope that he does. Secondly, there was one touch in the first half where you were like, "What are you?" Just a moment of control where something was absolutely hammered at him, and he brought it down with his left foot like it was a bag of cement. Where you just thought, right, well,
But those are the
you're
moments,
good,
aren't
aren't
they?
you?
Yeah, that's it.
You're probably
But
good at
that's it. That's what.
football.
But we could do that, can't we? That's kind of well, you just treat it for what it is, where it's kind of probably a nervy day, but then those innate moments where his natural instinct pops in and he's only got a split second to do what he should do naturally, and he controls it perfectly easily because that's natural. And then the rest of the time he's overthinking it. He's got loads of time, and it's just a bit much. And it's a big stadium. And last season, let's face it, he wasn't playing in front of people. He was just playing in front of empty stadiums. It's a different vibe. I'm not going to judge him too harshly on it either. So I think he's come in. We need him to do a job, but there's a chance that he will do because there's a lot of people who rate him, and we've done well to bring him in. So
for the record, without basing it on any sort of knowledge, I'm absolutely convinced that he's going to be brilliant this season. I just have a
we'll
really.
Take that.
Yeah.
I'll take your judgment, Joey.
Dom,
you've got a strong track record.
You'll know. Oh no, I've got an awful track record, but that's very kind of you to say. Dom, what would you say in terms of your sort of? I mean, you know these things, don't you?
Yeah, I think he is going to do pretty well for us. There's a couple sort of observations about him I've had, sort of having seen him in the Wolves game as well in the final preseason friendly. One was I was expecting him to be an absolute midget. I don't know whether it's another case of a footballer's height on the internet just being a complete lie.
Yes.
But I thought he was like 5'6", just like barely taller than like a Dion Kelly Evans, and he's just a normal guy's height. So like that. So I was worried when we signed him that we just like couldn't play him in a back four. It would just be diagonal balls galore. But yeah, he has looked a little bit tentative. He does look like someone who is very willing to get a cross into the box, whether that's the right decision or not. But I kind of don't mind that in a wing back. I think sometimes when you get sort of those wing backs who are sort of waiting for the perfect moment, it never quite comes. And yeah, I don't mind Spitty to get that cross off early. There's also just a couple of moments. He said just showing a bit of quality, looking to get a shot off. The one when Ben Chief's shot came off the crossbar and he was the first one to it. Just did this sort of quick little feint in the penalty area with about 2 or 3 players around him. I thought, I think he might have something about it.
That was good, and then what happened afterwards was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? But we'll forget that because it was a nice little feint.
Yeah, something about him.
I think that's fair. I don't know what you're talking about off stats on the internet though, because 12 stone Jamie Allen would have a lot to say about that.
I also saw very quickly in Cameron Kens's Ones to Watch blog described Declan Drysdale as being 6'5", which is I don't know where that's come from either. I think I've seen him a handful of times and have never thought you're sick. I mean, I've thought you look like a Disney prince, but I don't think I've ever thought you look like a Man Mountain Disney. He's obviously big, but he's not 6'5", is he?
Maybe that's just sort of football parlance for tall. Well, very tall, obviously.
But I also think that if I was the sort of person, like people, like if I've never gone on Wikipedia and put something on there legit, but I've vandalised Wikipedia lots of different times. I don't know whether the sorts of people that would do that sort of thing would be more malicious than they would be benevolent.
Yes.
But what a minute way to be malevolent.
Well, we live in the world of the internet, so
yeah, true.
Everything is a battle and everything's a victory. So, yeah. So yesterday, so the team, those were the 2 areas where it was a little bit The right hand side was one where we were a little bit unsure of. Left hand side, I think we were perfectly accepting of Maatsen getting that start. I think as the game as a whole, I said earlier, so excitable and rusty, and that was my view of the first half. I thought there were moments where there were little bits of interchange and bits of play and excitement and kind of finding gaps in space, and you started to get a sense that we were kind of getting into our stride, and then the ball would go to Hammer or Sheaf or O'Hare and they'd give it away, and you're like, no, we're not quite ready yet. And that was very much the first half, and there were quite a few kind of tackles which were a result of people being off the pace and just trying to get a tackle in to almost show that they were on the pace. And Sheaf was very much a victim of that for their goal, actually, where earlier it just made quite a rubbish tackle, really. Got booked for it. And then their guy, I forget his name, quite impressive, played for Lincoln last year. He's the one who took the... Johnson, yeah, obviously had an incredible run moving forward. Really just showed... I don't know if Sheaf could have got close to him. He would have tried to tackle him in any way. I don't think he was getting close to him. But, he very much looked like a guy chasing who couldn't tackle anyway. It was a great counter, really. We were at the edge of their box. We made a kind of a poor attempt at attacking. They came at us very, very quickly, drove on, and the ball across the box to Lyle Taylor, who else, Joey, was really good, and it was a very well worked goal. I couldn't feel too hard done by, mainly because it was a well worked goal. There's some rumblings that Darboe could have done better, but he got his foot stuck in the ground. So
I was going to say, have you seen it?
Yeah, he kicked the ground. I mean,
kicks the ground.
Yes,
I'm sure you can.
Don't kick the ground.
Yeah, I think that's just the sort of thing that happens. All round, I just thought that first goal. I think I've said this a lot on the podcast, and Paul never agrees with me. I just think sometimes you have to accept that it's a football match, and you might concede a goal occasionally, and there are some to be annoyed about, and there are some to not be annoyed about. And I thought that Johnson did superbly and was just quicker than Sheaf, which I don't blame Sheaf for, because I don't expect him to be. I think it's totally necessary for him to be just like a speed demon, is he? I thought he did really well. He knew where the space was. Then his delivery was really, really good. And we were just unlucky that Dabo kicked the ball. The other thing is, if Dabo does get a foot on it, there's only one place it's going.
True.
So he might have been lucky to have not got a foot on it. And I thought it was I thought they just executed it really, really well. The only thing that's possible that you could say is further up is, we have lost the ball reasonably cheaply to allow them to break so quickly, haven't we? But I thought defensively there wasn't anything terribly wrong with that goal.
And that's what it is, isn't it? I think in the hoopla of the match, when you're watching it and you see you attacking, and within 5 seconds you see that you've conceded a goal, you can't help but be raging because something must have gone wrong. And then you look back at it and you see circumstance and you realise you can't always control circumstance on the football pitch. And, the quicker player was up against Ben Sheaf. He was in the right position, really. The guy was just quicker than him. And the thing that happened with Darboe was just bad luck. So, we took it, and it was one of those where we didn't necessarily deserve to be behind, but also we definitely didn't deserve to be ahead. It was just one of those goals, and we end up having, to adjust and kind of approach the challenge in a different way. And, if anything, it made ultimately for a much better day having to come from behind. It always makes things a lot more exciting. But obviously you prefer that didn't happen. I mean, the other area just in that first half, just to have a little look at, is obviously the two strikers who were pretty tepid, I would suggest, in terms of their approach to the game. I think they were both just given a feel for what was what. They do seem very, very similar in their kind of approach, and also visually. I was struggling to kind of pick them out occasionally. I don't think they've necessarily got huge amounts of pace, but that first half especially, it was a little bit where we were breaking, we were kind of finding the gap between the midfield, and then there weren't really many opportunities to either slot those guys in. And it was just very much a sense of a first half of the first game of the season. Everybody was just trying to find their feet, and those two especially, I thought, would just kind of ease their way into the game and weren't really finding any opportunities to do anything particularly impressive for us. It came to half time, and the change we kind of expected happened. You know, you have to get Dabo on that right wing. You have to give him an opportunity to play his normal game. And then we brought in Rose. The only slight thing I wasn't too sure about, or wasn't just because Heim has played that left-hand side so many times, I was a little bit unsure about why we would move him over and then move Rose over and have a full displacement of the back. But it turns out, you know, that worked really nicely as well. I mean, that as a back three, I feel, aside from McFadden's distribution, which can be very, very wacky sometimes, I do feel perfectly settled with him. And I thought they actually put in a really settled the performance in that second half as well. Rose in particular, you know, he came on, and when Madsen went off and Jones came onto the pitch, I thought that was a really nice dynamic. And you had Rose and Jones kind of working together, recognising they were both new to the pitch and helping each other out. And it was a really nice kind of change there, and it made a lot of sense. And certainly on the right hand side as well. Obviously, you had Dabo coming onto the right hand side of the midfield-ish and putting a far more dynamic performance and showing everybody kind of the player that we know he can be. And I think if he can keep himself fit this season, I think we've got a very good championship right wing back there, and I'm really looking forward to him kind of pushing on. And he's just got a nice dynamic with Hammer and O'Hare as well. They seem to be all on a similar kind of wavelength in terms of the little touches, the 1-2s, the pirouettes off the ball, all that sort of stuff is very, very neat. And I certainly felt in the second half, as we got those more technical players onto the ball, we looked far more threatening, and we started to show some real intent to get a goal back. And the goal that we got back was well worked. It wasn't necessarily fully through design, but it was well worked. Where O'Hare, who did, I think it was an incredible bit of work on the right hand side, you know, got himself into a good position. And I think it was archetypal O'Hare, where he got himself into a good position, and then what he tried to do didn't come off at all. But luckily for us, this time around, it dropped to Gyökeres, and he, you know, I think everybody fancies a striker in that position to put the ball into the net, and you know, it sent us all pretty loopy for a while. And this was, you know, 80 minutes, so at that point you kind of accept that as, oh, maybe this is the equaliser, we'll take this draw. But also, given just how mad that stadium was, everybody was starting to think, yeah, let's give it another go and let's see what else we've got in us. And obviously Jody Jones was on the pitch at this point as well, who brought another sort of element of life to the performance. And it was quite interesting just to see him have the entire left hand side to himself, and that was also quite freeing just to watch him with the ball, with a lot of room ahead of him. And I think he put in a really good performance. I've not necessarily running with the ball, but actually just dropping the ball into the right positions for our strikers and for our players ahead of him. He was very, very careful, cautious, but also very purposeful with the ball. It wasn't simple passing. He was actually finding good positions and keeping control of the ball in possession. And it was a really, really nice performance and an introduction back into the team for him. And I mean, I'll wrap up my bit just saying, obviously, to get the goal then at the end, 96 minutes. I mean, what I find fun is how exaggerated social media becomes. I mean, I think the highest I saw was 99 minutes on social media in terms of that winning goal. I mean, that is pushing it. You can do your maths all you like. I'm pretty sure we didn't make it to the 99th minute. But, you know, to score a goal that late in the game just adds to the absolute euphoria that you feel. And I was the other side of the pitch, so I couldn't quite see what was going on. So you're relying on player reaction and fan reaction, and just to see that absolute madness when the ball finally drops and hits the net was, you know, incredible. And just the scenes, big scenes, and I loved it. It was a great return, really, really enjoyable.
Thank you, Neil. I mean, the problem I've got, so that was a wonderful description of the game. The problem that I've got is, I think we all, three of us, want Paul to be on here so that we can tell him he's wrong, don't we?
I want to tell Paul that he's very, very severe. That's what I want to tell Paul. I just think, you know, you can focus on the bad stuff and the things that you don't like, but there's other good stuff as well.
If you can sort of shed a little bit of light on what we're talking about here, because we had, as usual, a somewhat heated discussion on WhatsApp earlier, didn't we?
We did, and it's not based on anything other than everybody's mad opinion, and I include myself in that as well. We all watch and believe what we see is the truth, and this was all around O'Hare and his performance. So I think the broad opinion yesterday is O'Hare put in a really decent performance. Where things get a little bit cloudy are kind of around his final contribution, and specifically his contribution to the goal. And he's getting a lot of credit for the goal, and I give him credit for a lot of the work he did for it. But ultimately, his final pass, the thing that we were all there looking for, didn't quite work. And Paul was, I don't like to speak on Paul's behalf, but Paul was incredibly critical of O'Hare and the fact that he, his final pass throughout the game, he felt wasn't particularly strong, or it was very much O'Hare-like, as we're gonna phrase it. I don't think it was quite the same. I thought actually O'Hare did a lot of nice through passes, actually dropped it into, when there were opportunities, dropped it into our strikers quite nicely. I thought his work for Sheaf's chance on the crossbar was good as well. And I think ultimately there was an element of Luke Thomas, Ryan Kent threat about him where sometimes it's not working for him in terms of the final pass, but you still have to give credit for the threat that they offer and the energy and the dynamism that they give to the team. And I think certainly O'Hare, and I put something out there kind of cryptically, but also quite obviously on Twitter earlier about what the players would think about or other players on the pitch and who they'd call them man of the match. I'm fairly sure people on that pitch, the opposition and us, would look at O'Hare and say, he's decent, he's our player. They give him the ball. The opposition would say he's a threat. I think it was a good game.
Never has there been a better example of what you're describing there than the fact that we asked Tom Bayliss, Jack Grimmer, Tom Davis, Mark McNulty about who the best player in that Coventry City team was, and they all said Michael Doyle. And you were like, no, we're not about the best spirit or whatever. We're not about technically speaking the best player. They were like, yes, Doyle. You were like, well, no, you don't understand. I know you think you've seen him, but we're in the stands watching the game. Like, it's not the case. Yeah. But actually, as I feel like that with O'Hare is, I think I thought he played really well, and I think the tempo that he sets and all that other stuff, we know full well that final ball needs to be improved. But the dynamism about what he does, what's amazing about Paul, I mean, everyone will know this based on having listened to us over the last 10 years, but it's the fact that the nature of the argument earlier, there was nothing that he said that wasn't factual. It's the areas that he chooses to omit from his argument that are always fascinating with Paul. So he's like, basically, all that happened was he played a pass and it didn't come off. You're like, what about beforehand? What about completely removing two markers out of the game and fashioning the chance in the first place? No. You're like, he's just like, well, I don't actually remember that. I just remember the ball. You're like, well, it's not fair. And so I think I thought he was good all day. The thing will continue to remain. He needs to improve that final element of what he does, but it doesn't happen unless his own bit of individual brilliance beforehand, and he's still playing balls into difficult positions where we get something out of it. I don't know how churlish you'd have to be to say it was not good enough from a
and this is it. Like, I don't have an issue with picking, and let's say we set him at a higher standard because of who he is, the fact that he's O'Hare. We believe him to be a high quality than many of the players on pitch. If we're saying that's a standard, fine. But he lived up to that standard a lot of the other times. I mean, it's just the selection of even the good stuff that he did before the pass doesn't get credited. I need you need some credit. You need some credit for the good stuff as well. Just I hate doing this when Paul's not on here because it just feels like hopefully Paul will listen. And Paul, I love you, but we can't have a go at O'Hare for yesterday. It doesn't seem right.
I think it's beautiful to do this with Paul not here because I don't think he will listen to this. But I hope he does, and I hope he's sat in his car going mental about the fact that he can't respond to it. The other thing that I wanted to mention about that goal specifically was I would like to talk a little bit about the man of the moment, as I'm going to be calling him from now on, Sheafy, who I thought was really effective in both or around both boxes yesterday in a way that I've been very critical of him over the last year. I thought he was great yesterday. Paul described him
It
as
makes me
his man
laugh.
of the match.
See, this is where me and Paul and you, I disagree. So I wouldn't go man of the match with him. So I see what you see as well. So we heard lots of good things. I didn't see the Wolves match, but people were very, very like praising of him, and that was like, yeah, good. I want that. You know, we want Sheaf to be good. Yesterday he was kind of again that where he set the tempo, he moved things forward. He did lots of good stuff. He did a beautiful ball through, was it to Matson or somebody outside of the boot? Absolutely gorgeous pass. And you're like, oh, well, you really got some quality. And then it's just a pain in the ass sometimes. And it's like, I want you to stop being that much of a pain in the ass quite so often because I want to try and like you more. And it's just those moments. And this might feel like I'm going against my previous argument on hair, but it's kind of like the same message where it's the whole. There are bits where you're like, okay, just don't do that silly thing. Don't do the silly thing because everything else that you're doing is what I want from my player playing that position.
In the first half, no, in the second half, he lost the. Luckily, we got away with it because they blew up for a foul slightly earlier in the move. He lost the ball on the edge of his own 18-yard box doing a Cruyff turn. You just think.
Did see that? Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's very Ben Sheaf.
Did you not watch your own highlights from last season, Ben? Is that did you ever once pull that off? Like, why is that still happening? Surely the whole thing this season would have been like, well, look, I'll build up to that stuff and just get the basics right first. You got to think, what? Who do you think you are?
You'll get there, Ben. Come
on. Just worry about passing the ball 5 yards first.
Yeah.
But I just thought that he was. So I think to call him the man of the match was, again, another classic Paulism, wasn't it? But I thought he had a much better game. And I thought he was effective. The other thing I thought was that the thing that I've got to give him an enormous amount of credit for is I don't think you see that many truly box-to-box midfielders anymore, and I did think that he had the energy to keep getting up and down all game. I also thought that he played 2 exceptional crosses into the box in the first half that weren't met. And I know that you could say, well, they're not that great if they weren't on a player's head, but he was about 45 yards out. Do you know what I mean? On the right-hand side, and floated a really, really dangerous ball in. And I think one of the themes that we haven't touched on is I think that my slight worry looking at it was I don't think Gyökeres and Waghorn linked at all, really. And I thought that some of the movement, generally speaking, in the front 2 was not quite where it needs to be. Maybe that's just early season stuff. But I thought Sheaf, for a player that is very clear I've had no time for last season, I'm really, really looking forward to him stepping up because I think we desperately need it, don't we?
That's what we want. Exactly. We want, let's say last season was him adjusting, getting used to it, making some shite decisions. But this year we'll make less shite decisions and, he'll improve and he'll work together. And it's crazy that you say the box to box thing, the idea that we've actually probably got 2 where Hammer is just as equally box to box. I mean, that's a mad thing to have in the middle of your pitch. One question just around Kelly. This has totally gone off my radar. Kelly injured, I'm guessing?
Yeah, completely, I think.
Oh dear me. Okay.
I think bad knee.
Yeah.
I think it's always
nice to have him around, isn't it?
Is it always bad knee with him? I think, isn't it? Yeah, I think he's. I mean, we'll possibly save Harmer for another day, but I didn't think he was terribly great. But I think at this point there'd be few that would argue anything other than the fact that Kelly was our first choice midfielder. Before we leave the game on Sunday, Dom, I'd like to hear a bit more from you because I think you've been quite quiet throughout this. What have we missed in that game that you thought was noteworthy?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things we haven't really touched on, maybe because he didn't have too much to do in the end, was Simon Moore in goal.
Yeah,
true.
Where, there's been sort of quite a bit of talk of sort of what sort of caliber goalkeeper it is, and I suppose the honest answer is no one really knows, and how could they? Because he's played 2 games in 3 years, and there's rarely ever been a number 1 at championship level. So, honestly, we don't really know. And I thought there was one really good save from Brennan Johnson, and the goal we can't do anything about, really. But the thing that most impressed me about him was just feeling confident when the ball came into the area that he was going to claim it, and there were sort of 1 or 2 in the first half, And then from that point, I was like, okay, I think we're all right with this guy. And that's such a good feeling to have, considering the goalkeepers we've had over the past 3, 4, 5 years. So that was really promising. I suppose the one other concerning thing was some of his kicking was a wee bit off, but I don't know whether that's because we don't have any tall guys for him to kick to.
I think that probably has a bearing on it. The thing that I was really surprised about was I spoke to that Sheffield United podcast called The Shoreham View, who I really enjoyed talking to. I thought they were, sort of nicely pragmatic and not that kind of weird monotone that a lot of podcasts have. But I asked him about Moore, and he was really super complimentary. And I sort of thought, how can you know, really? But then he did play. Did he play when they got promoted to League One? Sorry, promoted from League One.
Yeah.
And I think played an element of their championship campaign, possibly.
Yeah, they had a lone goalkeeper, Andre Blackman,
Yes.
who came in like that summer after they got promoted. But then he got injured, and then Moore played out the rest of the season.
Yeah, and he just said, as far as they're concerned, like a perfectly serviceable championship keeper. And I've got a feeling that's what we've got, isn't it? I don't think he's going to be. He's not going to be Kieran Westwood, I don't think, is he? He's probably not even going to be sort of the relative level of Joe Murphy. But I think he's probably an upgrade. Well, we'll wait and see. My guess would be he's going to be an upgrade on Wilson and Morosi.
It's the comfort thing, isn't it? I think, like you say, just feeling more comfortable with somebody in there. And it was just some of those catches, some of those takes where you just felt there's an element of a commanding keeper here, which, we can get on board with. The kicking will come, and also the fact that we like to play it short out of the box is an important one for him. So let's see how he gets on with that. He seemed okay at that. But yeah, more than anything, it was just his ability to kind of take the ball, and the few opportunities that we saw, calm everything, take the ball, and then look forward. And there was some promising signs there. So I'm pretty pleased with that as a debut for us.
I read on Soccer Base that he's 7'2", and you'd have to think that aerial domination is going to stand you in good stead as the season.
Got his own field of gravity.
Yeah. What else did you note, Dom?
Not too much else hasn't been commented on. I thought Rose was actually really good in the second half, just calming things down quite a lot. And then there was one or two passes sort of going onto that right foot of his across the pitch to Dabo, which were very nice to see. And I think after the season he's had, where he was basically injured the whole time, and then when he wasn't, he was getting sent off and scoring own goals, it's sort of nice to see that he could well be a championship standard defender. And given all the talk there's been this summer over sort of where we need to strengthen, and on the day that we've finally learned that probably Ostergaard's not coming back, we've got three pretty good championship defenders. McFadden as well had a pretty good game, some really commanding moments, and then with that goal, which I was in the absolute perfect position for, to see that across the line, that was just the perfect angle. That was brilliant.
Can we talk about their goalkeeper very briefly for that goal? I thought that that's one of them ones where, as a keeper, you must think, why am I bothering being a keeper? Because when it went in originally, I was like, that's an absolute mess that you've made of that. And then the more times that you watched it, the more you were like, you've actually done really well there. You just look, you just look
Save,
like the first save is actually really brilliant, isn't it? He gets down incredibly quickly and palms it. Like he should have. You can say he should have tried to palm it to the side, but when you got like a big river of players in front of you and you have to make a snap, like quick save, like it was. How wonderful to imagine that you'd be like, oh, he should have pushed it. Yeah, of course he should have pushed it to the side, but how easy is it? So he pushes it back in, and then there's another, like, does he save two
Hammer.
before it?
I think Hammer hits it against somebody, but he has to go down thinking that it's coming to him.
Yeah,
so while he's on the floor, then it comes back to McFadden, and then obviously he gets down to save McFadden, but right into the net.
And they're all hammered at him. The third one, he gets the hand on, and it just creeps inside the post. You just think, I wouldn't be a keeper because you look at it at
Well, this
first,
is
and
it,
you're just
like-
like, "That's awful, mate. You've had a nightmare there." You're like, "I'm not sure he has." Perhaps his defence should take some responsibility for letting 3 consecutive shots come in.
Well, this is what I love about when you watch everybody seems to film this stuff in the stand now, and you kind of watch the Forest perspective on this, and you see some of these videos of people saying, "Oh, what a great save," and then the next response is, "Oh, great defending," and then he saves it, "What a great save," and he's, "Oh, you fucking idiot!" And you're like, at what point do you switch from thinking they're doing really well to be like, "You a fucking idiot"? Come on, it's just so funny to see that immediate switch from giving someone loads and loads of credit to suddenly hating them more than you've hated anybody in your life.
I saw a Forest reaction video to that goal specifically that I thought really made me laugh. In that they showed the goal and then almost immediately turned the camera around on their phone to show their own sad face.
That's directing for you. That's Oscar worthy. Yeah.
You just think you're like, oh man, this is awful, and then something in your head goes, but will people understand the gravity of the situation if they see my face? Like, hang on a second, was this
Is
good or bad?
authentic enough?
Ah, it's bad. I've just seen the man's face and he's very sad.
Oh, dear me.
Who's watching them videos? I mean, us, I guess. I think
Listen,
we've
probably-
probably
yeah,
all
that's
seen
too
it,
many
yeah.
people.
But who's going on YouTube and being like, "Man is sad at goal." Oh, here we go. We've got
Yep, 7,000 views. Oh god.
brilliant.
That's
Right,
right.
okay. So I think we're all wrapped up in terms of that game, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, then let's move on. We're going to sort of half pretend that the cup games don't exist to carry on the tradition that we've set for a long time, and instead move on to talking about Barnsley away. Dom, can you start me off by telling me who their manager is now?
It is Marcus Schopp. Once again, Barnsley have turned to Austria as a source of their managers, having gone there for Gerhard Struber, who went off to New York Red Bulls about this time last year, and then went back there for Valerian Ismail, and then they thought, third time's a charm, this one's going to stick around.
Do they have an Austrian owner?
They've got quite a weird ownership group. I think there's some Americans in there, there's some Chinese money, possibly. They own a few clubs. I think they've got one in France and Belgium,
Right.
and they have another in Denmark. So, yeah, they're sort of trying to think outside the box, and it's sort of been quite a gradual process. Quite a while, they're sort of a club caught between League One and the Championship, and sort of whenever you go up, you sort of you try and stay up that first season, and it doesn't quite go off, and then you have to sort of rebuild again in League One, and then they finally stayed up. Season before last, partially thanks to Wigan getting a massive points deduction, but then last season obviously they made the top 6, playing an absolutely insane brand of football under Valerian Ismail. And I think the question with Barnsley this season is, were they good, or was Ismail specifically making them much better than some of their parts? What Marcus Schopp is promising is to play a little bit more football, try and keep that pressing game, because they're quite a young and energetic side, fairly similar to us in that regard. And there's such little to tell really how good Schopp is as a manager, and sort of what sort of impact he might make at Barnsley. He finished mostly in mid-table with Hartberg in the Austrian Bundesliga, but I'm told they didn't have a great deal of money and play quite a lot of young players, so that was why Barnsley were attracted to Schopp. On the first game of the season, they played Cardiff under Mick McCarthy away from home, which it's probably quite a hard place to go to try and play a more progressive brand of football. They ended up drawing 1-1. They're probably bested by Cardiff sort of over the course of the game, but they scored a really, really nice goal where they sort of switched the play quickly, and their right back gets into the penalty area and produces the finishes. Yeah, good moment. And so it's into their first home game of the season. Obviously, had the playoffs, but again, this is sort of the home carrying match for them. And it's going to be interesting how they approach it. It's possibly quite a good time to play Barnsley just because there is that change of styles. They do have a few players who might be quite good at enacting that. Callum Styles, who's moved back into central midfield, having been their left wing back. Sort of a tyro, presence in midfield's got a bit of quality. Didn't get too much of an opportunity to show that last year, actually. Along with sort of Romel Palmer or Josh Benson, who sort of players might not be quite on your radar, but are very sort of energetic, young, good ball play kind of midfielders. And then Callum Britton at right wing back, just very reliable, very good deliveries. And they've got some power at centre back through Helik, who went to the European Championships with Poland, Max Anderson, Civic, who scored the goal on at the weekend. And then up front, they seem to have concentrated quite a lot this summer on signing just a lot of really tall, physical strikers. They already had Carlton Morris, who was in that brand. It's probably the pick of the bunch they have right now. Signed in January and scored at quite a reliable rate. Many playing off the bench though, because they had Daryl DK, who was doing all sorts of wonderful things for them. Obi Ulare, who had been at Watford and is very tall, or maybe that is just the internet telling me that. They've also got some interesting family connections in their attacking lineup. They've got Devonte, son of Andrew Cole, and Aranlia Iseka, who is Michi Batshuayi's brother, which is interesting. Okay. He was also a very good signing for anyone on Football Manager about 3 or 4 years ago. It's a team that's in an early phase of coming together. Actually, in terms of, sort of players incoming and outgoings, actually one of the smallest turnover of squads in the Championship, but it's that change of style. And it's going to be an interesting test. Obviously going to still press us quite highly, and that causes a fair bit of problems in the first half against Nottingham Forest. And you'd imagine getting the ball quickly into our strikers is probably going to be a good tactic here. And just to get their defence on the turn and hopefully get O'Hare in the game in dangerous positions again.
Can I ask, it had completely escaped my attention that Devante Cole had gone to Barnsley. What's he doing at Barnsley?
Well, I suppose it's one of those where I think if any other Championship club had signed him, you would have gone, what the hell are they doing? Have they not seen Devante Cole's career? Just sort of almost a club every 6 months and sort of scoring like 2 or 3 goals. But he had a pretty good season last season in the Scottish Premiership with Motherwell. He scored total of 13 goals in about 30 games. And you just assume with Barnsley that because they're very much into their numbers, they're into their analytics. One of the people involved in their ownership group is Billy Bean, who, if people don't know, was associated with Moneyball in baseball in America, although he wasn't actually the numbers guy behind it. I always think like people always assume he's some sort of numbers mage, but he was the first person to buy into it rather than sort of coming up with the actual like formulas and data behind it. But yeah, you just presume that if Barnsley signed them, there must be a very good reason for it.
Famously, it was Jonah Hill that was the numbers guy that was behind the Moneyball project.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's interesting then. I feel like this season, and if I dare verge onto territory that I've got no right to talk about for a second, I feel like this season we're going to see a strange set of teams be successful, and it will be the teams that didn't need a great deal of tampering from last season. And I think that Barnsley will be one of them. And I think Luton might be one of them. And I think Stoke are going to be really good. I'm asking that as a question to you. In fact, I'm going to repose that as a question, Dom. Am I talking out my massive ass here, or what's it, or do we think that's going to be the case?
I think that's a reasonable estimation. I think certainly in this early part of the season, after the first weekend, I think we've seen that certainly the relegated Premier League sides they're going through quite a big transition, and while that quality might eventually show, I think that's going to open up the door for, like you said, I think Luton and Stoke I really like the look of. I think with Barnsley, it's just because their manager is such a different style
guess,
from Ismail. I think that could be quite a big change for them to deal with. And again, I question whether they quite have the quality to become a sort of really dominant possession side, but time will tell, and they'll probably whack us 3-0 on Saturday to show me what I know. Yeah, and I think another one I would look out for as someone who's going to start very hot are Birmingham City. I think Lee Bowyer's someone who can get results out of teams very quickly, and there's sort of a lot of goodwill there. I just wonder how long that will last for. I think, we're going to see quite a few teams start the season very strongly, and then it will sort of balance out, and then the Premier League sides and Bournemouth with just massive squads will catch up with everyone over the course of the campaign.
There were certain things that happened last season that were real gut punches. One of them was Houghton being appointed at Forest so early in the season when they looked like they could have been an absolute basket case. Then really he came in and it never really came to pass. The worst was Bowyer coming in at Birmingham, wasn't it? Because he almost instantly turned them into, a team capable of producing enough 1-0 wins to comfortably pull them right out of it really quickly. You think if he did that immediately with a summer behind him, you kind of think, you actually could be quite good, couldn't you? I think that's what passes for a Neil Lamptey Show Championship Roundup.
Solid week.
Right, okay. Do we have anything else to plug, to talk about, to...
I plug your performance on that Nottingham Forest podcast. I think it's excellent. So everybody listen to that. I forget what it's called. But
I don't think, if you've just listened to an hour of this, listening to another 5 minutes of me doing a sort of condensed... I mean, really, the actual thing should be to put a disclaimer at the start of this podcast that says you could get a sort of 1 minute version of this somewhere else if you just...
Well, I reckon it's just listen to it a couple of days later. That's all right. So you've had your big bit today, and then just for like dessert, a couple of days later, listen to Joey on that, because stark just how good you are in it. I reckon.
That's very kind of you, but I think that's probably too kind. Dom, you've got all sorts of content.
Yes, the new season's underway. We've had our first preview of the season on sidewayssammy.com. There was a wrap this morning, and that should continue over the course of the campaign. Just the logistics have changed from last season, where it was possible to get them out like within 2 or 3 hours of the game. I can tell you right now that's not going to happen this season.
Even though, Dom, I think what was great was obviously you put out that somewhat cryptic but also quite obvious picture of a wrap with Coventry City in it for lunch.
Perfect.
But what I love about that is the fact that 90% of the people probably thought, oh, this is a wrap with Coventry City in it, so I'm just going to like it for that reason rather than connecting it to the fact that it's your piece.
I loved how literal that was.
Yes, it was top quality.
Really fantastic. Dom, do you know what we didn't talk about last week, I don't think, in the season preview? Did we talk about the transfer tracker?
I don't think so.
So the transfer rumour tracker.
Yeah,
so
not actual transfers.
I assume, and certainly hope that anyone listening to this is all over your content at the best times anyway. But if you're not, everybody should stop what they're doing right now and go over to sidewayssammy.club.com and look through the full summer's worth of transfer rumour tracker, because it's the best thing I've read over the whole course of the summer. Euros or anything otherwise. There's literally, there's lots of different blogs, lots of different stuff. And I must confess that even as much as I love you and Dom, you and Laurie and whatever, is I don't read everything immediately. But every time I saw an update to that, I went straight to it, no matter what I was doing. I just thought I just really enjoyed it, and I think that anybody I think it would be a real treat for anybody that hasn't read it so far to go back and delve through the entire thing, because it was nice reading it in snippets, but to read it in whole chunks like this, I think would be really, really enjoyable. But you've got loads of stuff that's been fantastic recently, and yeah, make sure that if you've not gone and done that, make sure that you go over and read it now. Right, I think we're done, aren't we? So thank you very much, Neil.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Dom.
All right, cheers. Good to be on.
We will be back next week, probably. Bye.